Welcome to the United States of America podcast. I am your host, Niti, and we are broadcasting live from the Food Church here on North Carolina. If you missed past episodes, please be sure to take the time to watch the first episode and then watch the rest like a documentary. We are a people at peace, and we have declared peace to all nations around the world. This is not a marketing or promotional channel. We are shining a light on knowledge that is being hidden from you. We are sharing a truth about your birthright and your inheritance. We have moderators who are assisting in the comment section. Be kind and self-govern. If you have questions, please put them in all caps and only enter them once per show. I am joined on air with Ohio Chairwoman Lisa Schaefer, and now I am proud to introduce you to Justice Anna Maria, who is joining us live from Alaska today. Hey, ladies. How's everybody?
Pretty good.
Well, Anna, I appreciate the week off last week. I am 100% renewed. I think I might be just on a little bit low. I turned off all the way. So like by Friday, I was finally feeling like off, and then today I was like, oh.
Niti has a vacation hangover, is what she's trying to tell you.
Yes, I can tell. That's all right. That's fine. We like that. She needed a vacation, and
I needed a reset. So thank you for that.
I was sorry to hear that your coordinator Dominic had had complications in surgery, and so we're sending all of our sympathy and love to him and his family, and hope that he makes a full recovery and is able to go forward from here. I don't know if you knew that was what had happened since you've been gone, but yeah.
Well, I heard that his procedure was postponed, Anna.
Well, he had a blood clot, and not to discuss, a whole lot of personal health business on national TV, but it's a very common problem now that people are suffering blood clots and have coagulation issues. And one of the best, easiest, natural means of preventing that from happening without the use of statin drugs is to make onion broth. And actually, if you can combine that with bone broth, you've got a really wonderful, healthful addition to your daily routine that will keep you from having blood clots and will help your entire calcium metabolism work better, so that you don't suffer osteoporosis and so many other ills that we associate with age, basically.
Yeah.
So I myself take bone broth religiously, and also really enjoy. I've always enjoyed French onion soup, which is basically onion broth, right?
Yeah.
So just make some onion broth and add some bone broth powder or some beef bones or whatever, chicken bones, and make yourself a cup of broth. Have a cup of broth a day. It won't hurt you. It doesn't add a lot of calories, but it does add a lot of minerals and a lot of cofactors that keep your blood working the way it should.
100%. I do bone broth every morning as well. It's very important.
Good stuff.
I'm on vacation hangover, Anna. What are we talking about today? I'm going to let you and Lisa just take the reins.
Well, gee, I can't imagine having a vacation hangover. The closest thing I get to a vacation hangover is one of my horsey friends sending me pictures of beautiful horses. But yeah, we've had a lot go on here this past week. I guess the big news is that the military is taking over, and you can begin to see that in the operations of a lot of departments. The agencies are more or less being shut down because of the Supreme Court action last, week ago, overturning the Chevron deference doctrine, and then that goes back and reiterates and puts more teeth into a decision that came last year that basically slapped Congress silly and said, no, you're not allowed to further delegate your legislative powers. You can't just hand your legislative powers over to another agency. In that case, it was West Virginia versus EPA. The EPA had been poking its nose in and enforcing all sorts of regulations against West Virginia. West Virginia came back and bit them in the butt and said, no, you're not going to do that. So there was the entire EPA decision, which basically took away a lot of power from the EPA as an administrative agency per se in that case. And this is just an expansion of the same theme, which actually goes all the way back to, I believe, a 1908 case in Tennessee. The Supreme Court of Tennessee in Norton versus Shelby County had rendered that decision all the way back in 1908 and basically said that no, there's no basis for an administrative agency to make law, administrative code, and enforce it on the public. So this has actually been decided at an appeals level in the federal system for over 100 years. And just the way things work and the way that the courts are operating, it's taken this long to get two back-to-back cases, basically back-to-back cases that the court has reviewed to overturn the administrative powers. And the administrative powers are, of course, supposed to be applied only to the agencies and corporations themselves, not to the general public. And where they've gone totally over the top and have abused their overstepped their boundaries and their powers is by applying their rules to us. And finally, the administrative courts and the agencies have been defanged. Now, as it currently stands, there's an argument about whether or not it's retroactive. And some people have said that, yes, it's retroactive, and others have said it's not. Well, to get a conclusive answer to that is to bring the challenge on a retroactive case. I personally believe that it will be retroactive because just like fraud, if you've been doing something that's incorrect over a period of time, it's still wrong whether it's in the future or the past. It's just a, once something is invalidated like that, it's invalidated as a principle. It's invalidated as a state of being, if you will, so that when you are looking at this, there will have to be some cases brought in which retroactive claims are made in order to establish precedent. But in general, when a court corrects something of this nature, it is retroactive. That, a correction and a claim can be brought for redress retroactively for fraud. And in a way, this is fraud.
So, Anna, are you also aware of the case that took place, I think it was 3 or 4 days before the Chevron deference, where they decided the SEC versus Jessie, that had to do with them making sure that you had retained your right to a jury trial by jury. And that was also in there. And I think that also helps defang the administrative courts, because often the judges will say, well, you can move the court to try to get a trial by jury, and they go, we don't think that's necessary here, so we're gonna move on with this. And I think that is going to have some implications too.
Yeah, I saw the Sarkozy case. That is interesting, and it does underline again your right to demand it's called a trial by jury, and you want to be careful in how you phrase that, because they will happily give you a jury trial, but that's not a trial by jury.
No.
A jury trial, the judge remains in control, and he simply has more witnesses to agree to his acts. He continues to rule on the entire thing, and all he's doing is bringing in more cohorts to nod and go. And but a trial by jury means that the jury actually decides the outcome. The problem with a trial by jury in our current system is that there is no way that they can provide us with peers.
Right.
The entire concept that comes to us from English common law concerning juries is that you should be tried by a jury of your peers and should not be judged by people above you or below you in the social strata. You should be judged by people who have the same obligations and the same social status as you do. And they cannot provide us with a trial of peers. They cannot provide our peers for a trial by jury. So we're kind of outside their system just based on that alone, even if we did not have a separate political status, which of course we do. So the need for us to provide ourselves with our own courts is also driven by the fact that we cannot provide ourselves with a trial by jury. They cannot provide us with a trial by jury. And so that limits the nature of the courts that we can put in the field. And it also limits our ability to assist them. They often call upon us to serve as jurors, but we can't serve as their jurors either because we're not their peers.
Right. So, I guess if you end up and you have to be in their administrative court, that you better take 12 or 13 friends with you who are your peers, right? So that when it comes for a trial by jury, you can say, oh, just so happens, anybody here that is a peer? So,
well, yeah, we've done things like that in the past.
Yes.
We put them on trial because we have concurrent general jurisdiction. We've put them on trial at the same time they've put us on trial.
From the other side of the bar, Anna?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't recall any case where we've done that, where the judge hasn't realized what was going on and stopped the proceedings.
And run out the back door?
Well, and they just everything just sort of magically disappears except the court case bond number.
Mm.
Now we're dealing with the court case bond issue because they have issued a bond against every court case determination, and they've basically been betting on this, a sure bet investment, because their judges have been bringing in 96% conviction rates. And what they do is they basically use the court case as a bond number, and they issue it as a bond, and they bundle these bonds, these court bonds, together, similar to a money market bundled mortgage investment. And they put it out for investors to basically bet on the outcome of these court cases with a 96% chance of recoupment. So they've only got 4% on average at risk. And it makes for a very lucrative investment, very certain return investment. So it's a very popular thing for people to be investing in these, but only insiders even know about this particular bond market. So it's an insider trading outrage, and it supports the CRIS system, which is the separate bar associations, judges, and court officers' pension system. So they get basically what you've got here is you've got hired jurists who make money depending upon how many convictions they can bring in. And they get paid on a set amount per charge that is brought into the court. So regardless of what else happens and how many other fees or impositions they determine in the given case, they wind up making $25,000 per misdemeanor and $1 million per felony charge. And so they're highly encouraged to come in and allege whatever they can allege against you because they're making that much money no matter what. And it may be even more now. It's been some years since I checked into that and found out that they were making that kind of money, obligatory money, right up front, simply for bringing in a charge. Okay, so they bring in the charge, and they reap that much off the top, and then they go forward with the proceeding, and as long as there is a determination in the proceeding, they get paid. And so that's why they're loath to dismiss cases that have no merit. That's why they're loath to exonerate cases that shouldn't have been brought in the first place, because they lose money on it. And that's how they get their cut. No matter what happens in the case itself, whether the person is guilty or innocent, they wind up taking their cut right off the top when they issue these bond numbers. Anyway, the whole situation is outrageous. They've run the courts as basically concessions. The judges get commissions based on how many convictions they make and how much money they get off those convictions, and they are getting a commission off of every court case that they try. So they are essentially jurists for hire who have a personal conflict of interest in that they are getting paid for these bonds that they're placing on the court cases, and they're also making a percentage on the fines and fees and other impositions that they collect. So this whole system is a form of money laundering and hidden conflict of interest, because it's going into their pension system. So they won't get it immediately, but they'll get it upon retirement. And so you could be a judge for just a few years and make a huge retirement. And anyway, this is part of the King's Bench. The King's Bench was set up in such a way in England that the king was the party of interest, and the members of the court, remember that King's Court, as in the court of knights and ladies and whatnot. Well, anyway, the King's Court would sit in judgment of the quote-unquote offender as if it were the king. And they would make the determination in whatever way was most advantageous for the king. Not for the actual plaintiff, but whatever was best for the king. And so they would make their determinations based on the king's advantage and benefit, not on the public's advantage or benefit, and not on the plaintiff's advantage or benefit, but what was best for the king, which is an entirely different issue. And then, according to whatever was best for the king, they would assign fees, and they would assign penalties and all the rest of it that would go into the court coffers, and then the court would get a percentage, a commission, off of all that they collected. This turns a court into a collection agency for the government. And that's exactly what they've been doing here, with the extra added kicker of the illicit bond market, where they've been able to increase their take on all of the cases that are brought before the court as charges. Another aspect of this is that when you go into the king's bench, you're already declared guilty. There is no innocence until proven guilty. That's why when they are presenting pleas and arraignments, they say, are you guilty or not guilty? And Joe Average, of course, says, well, I'm not guilty. I didn't do this, And they think that that's the same as saying you're innocent, but it's not. In fact, this is one of the gateways by which they entrap people. If you say not guilty, then you automatically inherit the burden of proof. And you have to, find a means of demonstrating that you are indeed not guilty of whatever they are charging you with, which is very difficult. But if you turn around and say, I'm innocent, well, then that automatically kicks it another level up in the court system and puts you in a different category. You're simply not given that option by the court, which is assuming that you are guilty. Okay, so you have to introduce the concept of innocence yourself in order to kick it up into the admiralty court, where you might actually get justice. Otherwise, you're guilty by presumption the moment you enter the door, and a plea of not guilty is only going to place the burden of proof on you to prove that you're not guilty. And proving a not is always very difficult if you think about it. You basically have to prove that you're not the person that is being accused, okay? Such that you have an alibi that you could not have possibly been in that place or doing that thing at that given moment. Or you have to provide a credible witness that countermands the charge. For example, if the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court happened to be there and see you at that particular moment and could come forward and would come forward and say that, oh, no, she wasn't doing anything like that at that time. I was, here at this party and I saw her, and no, she wasn't drunk driving, whatever. So you would have to have rather extraordinary testimony or extraordinary ability to prove that the charges being brought against you were specious, or they would simply roll over you with the presumption that you are guilty by definition. You're muted, Lisa. Lisa, can't.
It looks like we've got a lot of questions, so maybe we should go ahead and jump into our questions.
Dive.
All right, here we go. Robert Klein is first. It says, I am almost to the recording phase of the land patent process. Is it possible, and does it make sense to record on the land recording system?
Absolutely.
Someone asked me about foundling numbers related to the baby scam. Are you aware of these? And if so, could you please explain them and how to play into how they play into things?
Well, I believe foundling numbers are just another way of an old-fashioned way of describing the file numbers that are assigned on every birth certificate. Remember, there was this whole business of the Roman law, the Roman patriarchy, and the civil law that's attached to Rome, which says that if your father doesn't claim you, you are a lost chattel property of the city of Rome. Okay, so Rome increases its wealth by donated slaves who are foundlings. So if, for example, and this used to happen, centuries ago, someone gets pregnant and the man won't marry her, and so he doesn't claim the child. The mother does not, in that system, automatically inherit the ownership of the child. The city of Rome would inherit the ownership of the child, and the child would be a slave of Rome. Anyone that was unfortunate enough not to have a father becomes a slave in the municipal system. And so it becomes a motivation for the municipal system to claim that everybody is a fatherless child, because that allows the city, the municipality, to enslave them. And that's what a foundling is. A foundling is the little baby wrapped up in a blanket and left on the church steps. Okay, and so they assign these foundling numbers when they establish the birth certificates. And the foundling number is the file number. And it's just an older system, or an older way of categorizing people as slaves, as unclaimed property. The father didn't claim it, so it's now the public interest. And this is an outrageous, old, ancient, ugly, excuse for enslaving people. So, part of our irritation with the church, where this primarily enters modern society, is through the church and through the city of Rome's association with the church, right? Mm-hmm. As the Roman Pontiff's office, was that it obligated them, in order to make their scheme work, their legalities scheme under Roman civil law, was that they had to claim that all these mothers were not married. And so, you look at this whole situation, and even though the certificate itself says mother and father, what they're doing is claiming that you were never married and the father didn't claim the baby.
It gets more and more ugly every time we learn a little bit more. Just like, that's disgusting. I mean, the more that we hear and learn, so literally birth certificate is the intake number of the lost property, okay, well, I'm going to move on to the next one. Karen says, if you're a veteran changing your status, if you are a veteran, does changing your status stop your retirement money? No, your benefits are not going to stop. There's nothing else really to say about that, right, Anna?
Well, I think there is this much to say about it. People need to realize that each one of these things that we think of as government has been incorporated and privatized. So that when you think that you're working for the U.S. Army, right? Mm-hmm. You're actually working for a franchise of a British Crown corporation called variously as the USA Inc. in some form. And so it's like working for a large corporation. Mm-hmm. And they owe you that money no matter what. Because just like, 3M owes its employees a pension, or Ford Motor Company owes its employees a pension. These corporations owe you a pension. And whether you are collecting that pension as an American on the land and soil, or you're collecting it as a federal citizen in Dubai, it really makes no difference. You are still entitled to all of those, that range of service-related payments and services from the corporation.
Yep.
And the only danger, of course, is that if the corporation goes bankrupt, your pension might sail out the window too. But as we are their primary creditors, then we would inherit the debt, and we would also be able to continue your pension payments as a top priority in any bankruptcy proceedings.
Nice. This is the continuation. So how does that status change affect their trademarks or copyrights that they might have in the system?
Well, it doesn't immediately and directly affect any of that, except that you claim the trademarks and copyrights as the original owner of the trademarks and copyrights.
So then we actually hold them now, Anna, instead of the Pope?
Right. Well, you see, all of this is considered abandoned property when you are abandoned as a baby, as a foundling.
Okay.
And
this is important. This is a really cool thing to comprehend, because when you were saying that they own all the corporations, like the Pope owns all the corporations and the trademarks and like everything that comes through the postal system, right? So this is fascinating to learn that you're saying that we actually do get to hold on to our trademarks and our copyrights, and not the Vatican.
Right, but you have to reclaim them as an adult.
Okay.
And this is the part that we're not doing because we're never told this.
And how do we do that?
You basically are serving notice that you are adult now and you're taking control of your trademarks and copyrights. Your mother and father established your given name, and you have a natural private copyright on it. Then the government comes in and they claim a usufructuary right to use your name for public purposes. That then entitles you to be held harmless of any use that they make of your name, that their franchise uses, right? So for them, the big kahuna, the big elephant in the middle of the room is the usufructuary duty that they have to hold you harmless. And believe you me, when you pull that card out of your hat and say, hey, you have this franchise that you're using for money laundering purposes, that you created without my knowledge or consent and named after me, acting as a public usufruct, well, you owe me the usufructuary duty to pay any debts that this thing of yours owes and hold me harmless for its existence. They hate to hear that. But the fact is that, yeah, they created these things and named them after you, and they benefit from creating these things and naming them after you, primarily by not holding you harmless and by charging you as if you were equivalent to these corporations that they've created out of thin air and named after you. So when you haul them up by the proverbial hairs and tell them that they need to honor their usufructuary duty to hold you harmless, that's telling them that they have to pay the debts of their own franchise corporations.
So in this situation, Anna, the difference between the trademark and the copyright at this point, what can you please speak a little bit about if there is any and what it might be if there is a difference? Because I notice a lot of people use TM instead of the copyright symbol with their name, for example. Could you speak on that?
Well, back in the 1700s when this all began, and we now know that the government of England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales abdicated their land and soil jurisdiction and went to sea in 1702 as a company called Great Britain. And most people have assumed that Great Britain meant some sort of supranational government that was on the land and soil and had a general jurisdiction. But no, it turns out that Great Britain was a trading company and that they rolled all of their land assets into national trusts, and that Great Britain was a international trust and trading company, and they used the land assets of these 4 countries as collateral to back their enterprises from 1702 to approximately 1860, when they started enfranchising the people as land assets and then being able to use their labor and their physical performances as a source of income for their national trading company and national trust, which is, it was just how they were funding all of their expansionist policies during the British Empire. And so this was all being done under cover of darkness. The people were never told any of this. They were just kind of herded around and used as chattel property without their knowledge or consent. And they were deprived of their contractually guaranteed constitutional monarchy the entire time. But the blighters continued to pretend that the constitutional monarchy was in effect long after they had gone to sea and no longer provided any such government. Anyway, they did the same thing here. And now that it's been outed and people can see it, they can also go back and better appreciate this issue of trademarks and copyrights, because what they did is they went through the entire countryside and they gave everyone a surname. Now we spell it S-U-R, name, surname, right? But it also phonetically means sir, S-I-R, name, a public office name, okay? So they created and trademarked all these surnames so that each government, whether it was a German surname or a British surname or a Czechoslovakian surname, everybody had a last name, a surname that obligated them to be a public citizen, right? Yes, your last name has been copyrighted has been trademarked, not copyrighted, I should say. It's been trademarked since the early 1700s. Unless, of course, you had a relative who was savvy enough to realize what was going on and to create a new name that was not part of the trademark system, that was privately engendered and separately used as a trademark, and give you a new surname that was created exclusively on a private basis. And this is what my great-great-great-grandfather did for me and all of his progeny, is that he created a new surname as a trademark, and he set it up as a separate entity apart from any public trademark. And he could do that because he was part of the nobility, and the nobility, of course, found ways of excluding themselves from the filthy commercial system that was being imposed on the rest of the people. And that's why the names of the nobility are always 15 words long. That's how I wound up with Anna Maria Wilhelmina Hannah Sophia Reisinger von Reitzenstein von Lettow for Beck as a name, is that it does not fit in the public scheme of names. And so anyway.
That's how all the Indian names used to be, Anna. Like, when you look at all of our original names, and then like, of course, our parents are there. It became popular with them to try to make them as short as possible. And so they shortened all their names. But like traditionally, all the names were like a paragraph long.
And they were descriptions. They
Yeah.
were descriptions of a place or a time
The
or
provenance. I mean,
yeah,
when you teach us about the provenance, I think about that because all of the names, like if our parents didn't change their names because they made them teeny tiny names out of these big long names, but all the names back then would actually clearly establish your provenance because it incorporated all the mothers and the fathers all the way back. And it was a clean family tree. So your one paragraph would describe your lineage like 6 generations back.
right. And
Wow.
that's why we have lineage treaties and published
What?
lineage.
What? I've never even heard of that. Lineage treaties? Did you know that, Lisa? Do you have one?
A lineage treaty is when you are claiming back to rights that were grandfathered in. Have you ever heard the expression grandfathered in?
Yeah, I got a building that's grandfathered in.
Right. So this is a retention of rights that accrues to property assets. And your lineage establishes your rights to certain property interests. So in this country, if you can establish that you have ancestors that went back before the revolution, you have a different set of prerogatives and grandfathered in rights and material interests than if you can only prove that your lineage goes back to the Civil War. Or your lineage only goes back to World War I, or you have a whole different sphere of options, so to speak, if you are grandfathered in all the way back to the colonial days. And so that's what a lineage treaty is, and it's established simply by establishing your genealogy. And that's why I have problems with the LDS Latter-day Saints operation with regard to how the government has benefited itself on the members of the Latter-day Saints. But anyway, that your lineage shows who you are in a way. And the names of nobility and the names that are traditional in India provide that kind of provenance that demonstrates and describes who you are and where you come from in a literal description sense. When you say that you are, Anna Maria Reisinger von Reichenstein von Lettow-Verbeck, what you're saying is that this is how the family interconnects at basic important junctures, and this is how you got here. And it's a description of a journey in a sense, as well as a place name, because each one of those names, except in my case Reisinger, which is a totally fabricated and constructed trademark that our family has been using for 7, 8 generations, that all of those are place names. Reichenstein is a place name. It's right. You come from Reichenstein. Lettow is a place name. Verbeck is a place name. So,
Frank, a lot of the people who immigrate into our country, and you see day, and it has a, or they have some kind of a designation. That's usually because they're proving their provenance, and that's a city or a state that they have come from, that their family has come from, that recognizes them as from that place.
Like Ponce de Leon was from
Yes,
the
it's from Leon,
Leon.
Spain. So, so that's how the words kind of fit together as you can look at some of the things that happen. And I have not published. I've done the research on our families, but I haven't published it. And there is a place on the LRO where you can publish your lineage, and make it out there so that it becomes your lineage treaty. But I have not done that yet.
And for example, your family goes way, way back into the colonial days, and so you can claim all the way back, and should. And that that gives you basically an unlimited footing, or unlimited standing, as it is in the law, to bring forth claims against the land and soil and every other aspect of this country.
Correct.
Especially Ohio, girl. You got that whole thing set up.
So it's really interesting, and I used I didn't use Ancestry. I used a site called FamilySearch.org, and it pulls from 9 different lineage databases. So if anybody's really interested, that's FamilySearch.org. And I found it much easier to use than the most popular one that's advertised all the time. But it really it really gave us, when it opened up those sources, you would giggle, Anna. Kind of one of the jokes on the Ohio Assembly is my lineage, because I have one side of my lineage that is, of course, goes right into colonial roots and its revolutionary history and back into England. And it kind of dies off there on my side of the family. That was my father's side of the family. On my mother's side of the family, though, hers was a more Germanic, Hessian kind of roots, and much like yours. But mine went on into more the Prussian side, where it goes into, believe it or not, goes back to Emperor Vladimir. And Emperor Vladimir was also a grandson of Attila the Hun. And when my husband heard that, when we saw that, he looked at me and goes, that explains a lot about your mother. So so they teased me on the Ohio Assembly about, pulling out my Attila the Hun. So so it's, family history is fascinating, though, when you get back into it. On Doug's side of the family, one of his grandmothers was Mary, Queen of Scots. He came from the Douglas clan, and then his history goes on back into the Celtic roots of Ireland and Scotland. We traced his back into BC. So very interesting, where we both journeyed from, where our families have journeyed from. So
it is. It's fascinating, and everybody should make an effort, pardon me, among all their other efforts, to nail down who they really are.
Yeah. I mean, Rohit's family, they, that was, India was all fiefdoms. And his father's generation was the first generation that had to work. Like, had to go get a job, because they ran their fiefdom up until just now. And so his dad was the first generation to leave the land and have to actually get jobs. And then my husband was then the second generation. We're hoping to take it back to the land now and turn that back around with our son. But, I'd like to be able to go back, and I have to talk to his brothers, his dad's brothers, because my father-in-law wasn't as interested in that, but like his brothers were very interested, and they have been tracking and tracing all that. So I want to get all the information I can from them.
Well, one of the problems then with names is that they've been used as trademarks in commerce, and they have been trademarks that have been registered for the public interest by the government. Okay. And that's why some people just say use your given name only. So in my case, I would, for public purposes, I would only be known as Anna Maria, and there would be no surname attached, because what I can claim is the given name that my parents gave me as a gift, right? So this is where this entire thing goes. Now, I can also use Risinger because that is a well-established trademark that was privately created and construed. So there's nothing against me using Risinger because it was never part of the surname system that was created by the government. When that name precedes all the other place names, it further establishes the lineage and where you came from and from what families you derived. And principally, the father's name takes precedence over the mother's name in most countries. That is not an absolute. There are exceptions. But generally speaking, those countries that were under Roman law or under Roman influence, it works out that the father's last name comes first.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
would you suggest that we should we trademark a new name for our future?
No, I think that what we need to do is get hold of the government by its throat and, basically discuss these issues as an entire informed society of people that are, now fully informed regarding what the government's been doing behind their backs to create improper, illegal, immoral claims upon them and claims upon their natural estate and property. Yeah. And that's why it's very beneficial to have your own government that's out there pleading your case and taking your part and defending you against these kinds of legalistic usurpations by other governments. This is, what we're doing right here and now is what defends you against those kinds of uses and claims. Yep. And so then, the education you're receiving here about these historical practices and meanings of these things and the forms of law that they arose under is invaluable to you in order for you to defend yourselves and to make your claims properly and to establish your lineage so that nobody can say that you're an unknown person.
Right. They want us to so the orthodoxy has been training us, you guys, through the corporatocracy to believe that, we were having this discussion at a family dinner this weekend. We were celebrating my mom's birthday, and they were talking about, how you shouldn't be helping your children because what are they talking about? They don't. The orthodoxy has made it seem like we helping our children by connecting our children with people who we know to, advance in any interest that the children have, that we shouldn't be doing that because they feel like, it all started with this basketball player. I'm sorry, I lost my thought. I'll come back to it. But it just was relevant because they don't want us to know who we are or where we're from.
It's to their advantage if we don't.
Right.
They don't have to honor our claims. If we can't honor our claims ourselves, if we can't prove who we are and what we're owed, that's a great advantage to them. So of course they want us to forget who we are. That has always been the Roman way, is to, come in, conquer a people and then force them to Romanize and to adapt the Roman system and to be taught from the cradle that the Roman system is superior to anything that they ever had, to begin with. And then pretty soon they think that the people out there who have been conquered start thinking that they're Roman. And so they forget who they are. And the moment they forget who they are, then they have no more means of resisting. It's like the Borg, okay? And so this is what they're driving at. Is, you know, they're trying to make you forget who you are, where you came from, and most especially what you are owed in terms of treaties and in terms of contracts, service contracts.
Yep.
And so this is all part of their benefit against you.
Mhm.
And without your government in the field defending your rights and your treaties and enforcing your contracts, you're up a creek, which is why we're here. This is why we are, restoring the entire system.
This is, Karen, why it matters that you do know that you get your benefits, and that by becoming, coming back home doesn't mean you're going to lose any of your benefits. So going back to these questions, then,
I'd really
They
like to
continue.
answer the next question that is on there, Niti, about once someone with a green card. I think that would
I
be.
was gonna go there. I just didn't want to forget about this one. Is it better for new ASNs to just send individual notice letters to state of state officials rather than U.S. officials? Which, by the way, friend, these are the same people.
Yeah, actually, the person that you have to notify significantly is the United States State's Department. Okay, and what you need to do is to notify them of your status as an American, and a state national, being a Wisconsinite or a Vermonter or a North Carolinian or a Virginian, and have this on the record that you gave them notice of your actual nationality and political status. Now, you can also request a certificate of nationality. Now, a certificate of nationality places you in the state trust. Okay. As I told you, what the Brits did and what they have tried to do here to a greater or lesser extent is to place all land and soil assets in a state trust that they then administer for you without your knowledge or consent, on the false premise that you're missing at sea, because they're missing at sea. Okay, so it's all just a big freaking con game to gain control of your assets. So they give you a certificate, and anytime somebody gives you a certificate, that is telling you that they've human trafficked you. They've reduced you to the status of a human, and they've human trafficked you somewhere. So anytime that you get a certificate, it's basically your proof. You have your coat check that your property has been transferred somewhere. Okay.
Evidence of the crime, huh?
Yeah, think of a certificate as a warehouse receipt. Okay, it tells you that your coat has been moved to closet A. All right. All right, and you can come back and you can collect your coat. You've got your certificate, but you have to come collect it.
Yeah.
So what these Brits have done, and the U.S. Secretary of State is a foreign official working for the British government, not us. The U.S. Secretary of State will issue you a certificate of nationality, which will put you in the state trust box. Okay, so now your name has been taken out of the general circulation and recognized as a state trust asset in the state where you were born.
The state where we're born, we notice them, or you're talking about Blinken, or you're talking about our current state where we're at?
I'm talking that in terms of notifying the government, the primary person responsible for receiving such a notification is the United States Secretary of State.
Blinken.
Yep.
Okay.
His office.
Yep.
Once the correspondence is received, of course, he never sees it. It gets shuttled off into other corners, and they will just kind of go, all right, and they won't do much of anything about it. So you want to also notify the state of state Secretary of State, like the state of Wyoming Secretary of State, who is Blinken's little local
minion.
Yeah, the peons. Yeah.
Okay. So you want to also notify them at the same time.
Yes.
And you want to notify the governor of the state of state.
Doesn't that go through your local state of state?
Yeah, well, that's where you're sending a letter. You make up one letter and you have 3 addressees, and you just send copies to the state of state officials. Your headliner is the United States Secretary of State, the big kahuna in charge of their entire operation. Then you notify the state of state officials, who are the local representatives of that hierarchy.
Yeah. And
so everybody knows that, they're a Wyomingian, they're a Wisconsinite, they're here in this state, but we now know their original nationality, and that much has been tagged down.
That's interesting, Anna. The instructions for sending our 4 letters does not include the suggestion to send that out to your specific state of state or governor. And it may be something that needs to be added to the overall instruction set for the letters process.
This is the reason I'm making these notes and asking the questions, because I definitely notified our state of state and then our secretary of state, but I didn't specifically address our governor, because I presumed that by notifying our secretary of state that she's making sure the governor knows. So
they're supposed to, but they don't always.
Got it. Well, no, this is important, because that just means I want to make sure to let the governor know separately.
Yeah, well, think of the Secretary of State as the civilian liaison of the British government.
Okay.
And think of the governor as the military liaison of the British territorial government.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So you want to make sure to notify both the federal hierarchy official and the state of state franchise officials that are closer to home, so that they can't claim that they didn't know.
Right.
Blinken's office is supposed to notify them, but what if they don't? Well,
he's not answering. I haven't gotten a green card from Blinken yet.
Be sure and tell the local officials as well as the federal official, tell the local franchise guys, so that they can see that a letter has been sent to their boss, and that, they can see that a letter has been sent to each one of them. Both the civilian and the military have been fully informed of
fully CC them all. I gotcha.
Yeah.
CC them all.
Your nationality has now been clearly stated for them, so that they don't have an excuse of saying, well, this is an unknown person on a battlefield.
Right.
Okay. That's what they've been doing. But now even the essence of the battlefield narrative is unraveled, because it's mercenary conflict that they've been pursuing all these years. So no, it's not really a legal thing, what they're doing. What they've been doing.
Criminals.
Yeah,
the criminals. So then, okay, so Anna, if for North Carolina, Elaine Marshall's our Secretary of State, so you're saying she's civilian liaison, and then if our governor is the military liaison locally, does that mean that Blinken is the civilian liaison, and then there should be some other military one?
No.
Okay.
Look at this in a practical sense. You're here living in this state, right?
Sure.
Your state is not a state of state.
Right.
You are corresponding with a foreign official in a different jurisdiction
Yes.
to make it clear who you are and your right to be here and your provenance, so to speak. Okay.
Sure. Yep.
So you are telling the British territorial officer known as the U.S. Secretary of State who you are and what your provenance is, and that then settles for him the question of who you are and how you came to be here. Okay. You can follow that up by telling the local civilian and military officers of that corporation the same information.
Got it.
Which makes it obvious for them that you're a civilian, that you're American, that you are owed certain provisions and protections, and that you are part of the American government, okay, so to speak, because you are a national of that state. Now, what they will try to do is get you a certificate. There's that word again, a certificate of nationality that will cashier you in their state trust. Okay. Now, the state trust is not hard to get out of, but you have to demand your property back out of the state trust once they have cashiered it in the state trust. Remember, that certificate is like a coat check.
So we want the certificate.
This is one of the ways in which you can do it. You can get the certificate of nationality, then you can go to the state trust and say, I want my stuff out of the state trust. Okay.
I want it. Yes.
Or what would be even more official and more beneficial to everybody is if the state assembly demands that all of their property, their combined property, be removed from the state trust. They don't want to give it to you, obviously, because they're making a tremendous amount of money off of, manipulating and investing and fiddling around with your assets and using it as collateral for their debts. So they don't want to give it back to you. And they may even feel that they can't, or they may be in bankruptcy and have dragged your state trust into their bankruptcy by, falsification of identities and impersonation and all that other happy horse shit. So what we do is well, look, they're playing all these games. They're operating as a big time corporation. They're benefiting themselves at the expense of the people that they're supposed to be protecting.
Yeah.
So they've turned the offices and the purposes of government on its head, and the purposes that they have declared is simply to make profit at any cost. And so they have made profit on your lives. They've made profit on your labor. They've made profit on your assets. They have invested and been wheeling and dealing and using you as collateral for their spending for generations. And they're not going to want to say, oh, gee, we made a mistake and here's your stuff back. This is something that we have to, as a people, bring forward and through our government, argue it and settle it. Just like the use of trademarking surnames and copyrighting given names. These are activities that are outrageous. They shouldn't exist in the modern age, but they do because Britain began operating in a secretive and criminal fashion back in the 1700s. It's an open question whether there was a King George. We don't believe at this point that there was a King George seated as an English king.
I mean, I really thought that William the Conqueror already handled all this.
Well, he did. But within the milieu of the king that was crowned by the Pope in their system of things,
The Roman system.
Was there even a King of England crowned?
King of England. So England is the DC though, right? Over there. Like that's their.
No, England is the country.
Is it London that they're saying is their DC?
Town of London.
Well, yeah, they're using London as their capital and all that. But no, that's not the point, Niti. The point is that you have a country called England. England is already divided up among all of these French barons that have all of their little fiefdoms that are called separate kingdoms. They are
right. The 8 barons.
Yeah, they already have this all divided up. Mm-hmm. However, there was this thing called the English Civil War, which was a mercenary conflict. Okay.
Oh.
That happened in the late 1600s, and going into the 1700s, they were sorting out the different interests that conflict represented. Okay, so similar to what they did here, but like 100 years earlier, 150 years earlier, they were going through this same business of they left the land behind and went to sea. Okay. So the country of England, like the country of Scotland that had public lands, all of that got thrown into what? National trusts. And the government left.
This was the Great Britain collection.
This was the whole. This was the genesis of the whole shtick that they then applied to everybody else, or tried to. So, the question is: was King George actually King of England, or at that point was he functioning as the British monarch? And you can't do both at the same time because you can't be on land and sea at the same time.
Right.
So we're left with a question of, were any of their contracts signed after 1702 valid? Or were they all fraudulent and misrepresented?
Huh. So like everything that you cleaned up here on the States, like how we signed the Civil War, peace treaty, blah, blah, blah. This is what you're having to do over there now.
Well, over there, the people are even more confused because until very, very recently, they have assumed the existence and the proper functioning of a constitutional monarchy under a Protestant king or queen, which is what was promised to them coming out of the English Civil War. And to learn that they have been defrauded all these many years, and that the king is not a king and he's just an overseer for the Pope, and that he's obligated to the Pope because the Pope gave him his crown, is just absolutely astonishing to most people. It's also astonishing to learn that Great Britain isn't a country, that that the British monarch is not a king, that the crown came from the Pope, and that in actual fact the French nobles were forced to contribute land holdings to a trust, a national trust, as condition of the settlement of the illegal English Civil War, which was a mercenary conflict. And so, they have their own ball of wax. Everybody's so worried about what England's going to do to us. Well, let's put it this way. The British have got more to account for than anybody, and they've got their own problems. Right now, they've got a king, quote unquote, who isn't a king, who has instead been crowned as an imperial majesty and an emperor in the jurisdiction of the air, and who is continuing to try to kind of brazen this out. And they are still not receiving the constitutional monarchy that they're heir to and that they are owed. And all of these various trusts have been violated because, the conditions that the nobles or the barons surrendered their lands to the National Trust was predicated on the constitutional monarchy and on the king or queen being Protestant. Well, wouldn't you say that even if they were Protestant, and there is absolutely no reason to think that they really truly are, of any kind of particular known standardized conventional religion, even if they were, they would be working for the Pope as the Pope's overseer of the Commonwealth lands in those four countries. And that would be the basis of their kingship, because remember, they were left with no land of their own. They can only oversee the land of others in Britain.
Right.
So if you wanted to have a really good, sort of entertaining binge watch that gives you a little bit of an inkling of European history and how kings and queens were made, and just all the politics and the Catholic Church embedded into the middle of it, there's a series on, I think it's Netflix, called Reign, Reign, and it tracks from the youth of Mary Queen of Scots through Elizabeth, and it talks about how all of the royalty went on in France, in Spain, the conflicts, everything that they put together, the Civil War, the War of Culloden. It pulls all of that together, and it's it's entertaining, but at the same time, if you really want to learn about the influence of the Catholic Church and how kings and queens were made, it's perfect. It's perfect in how it brings it forward. So again, that's called Reign, Reign, and it's just a super example, and it gives you the complete understanding of how all of that was negotiated back then and the influence of what went on. So
right, and it was all Catholic.
What?
The King of England, to the extent that a King of England existed after 1087, was created by the Catholic Church.
Correct.
And it was an office that was conferred on the Pope's caretaker of Commonwealth lands in England. Correct. Now, the other, they started weaseling and chiseling other interests too. And one of the most fascinating ones that I've run across is the sale of souls. You remember that King Henry VIII wanted a divorce from his Catholic wife, Catherine, and so he had to get a dispensation from the Pope. Then he wanted to get divorced again. One divorce was usually a miracle enough for most people at the time, but Henry wanted a second divorce, and that was beyond the pale. I mean, that was just a bridge too far for the Pope and for the Church. Well, so then Henry shows up at this. I'm going to say the wrong word. I'm going to say conclave, but it wasn't a conclave. There was another name for it that went on. Anyway, he shows up at this meeting in Rome and meets with the Pope. And by that time, he had broken off from the Catholic Church and had created the Church of England and appointed himself the head of the Church of England. And so he and the Pope go into a back room, and between the two of them, they cut a deal. Henry can remain the head of the Church of England, and they can follow a doctrine and a liturgy very similar to the Roman Catholic Church. And he will be given a 40% interest in the souls captured by the sacrament of baptism, and the Pope will be given a 60% interest in the souls. And so they start keeping records of baptisms, very, very strict records of baptism in the Church of England. And the results, the baptisms, are certificated. There's that word again, certificate, proof of trafficking, your coat check to receive back your property. The certificate legalizes their illegal theft of your property. It makes it look like you have agreed to this, and you have warehoused your soul with whatever church it is, and you have now been given a baptismal certificate for your soul. You've been given a receipt from the warehouse, the church, for where your soul is kept. Okay, so the Church of England got a 40% out of the deal on each baptism, and the Roman Catholic Pope got a 60% interest, and you got the certificate. And so then this gives the king and the Pope an interest in your lifelong labor and performances and intellectual properties. And that includes your patents, trademarks, inventions, the value of your intellectual assets, what they call nowadays the PKI. And they actually monetize this, and they use it as collateral to borrow against, and they use it as a means to enforce foreign law on your exercise of your performance contracts, which includes labor contracts and all other sorts of things related to energy and ideas. Okay, so at the time that you are born, they seize upon your quote-unquote birth certificate and traffic you off the land and soil of your native country. And then they proceed to apply these other agreements and disbursements of material and intellectual interests as you grow up. And if you are unfortunate enough to be baptized in the quote-unquote Christian church of any kind, those baptismal certificates get monetized and traded in a black market of souls, where they buy and sell souls. And this has been going on since the reign of King Henry VIII, who basically sold out the members of the Anglican Church to the Pope and got a cut on the deal. And that same 60-40% split between the king and the Pope is observed in the birth certificates. When you track the money and you follow that entire stream of income coming off of the human trafficking of you, your identity, off into the sea jurisdiction and the whole business, the claim that you waived your American estate in favor of being a British merchant mariner and all this other bullshit. The money coming off all of that follows a specific route. And you can follow it all the way to Rome, where Rome gets its 60% cut. And then you see the money go to England, where the king or queen gets their 40% cut. And then it goes back, another cut goes to the British territorial government in Canada. And then finally, the collaborators and co-conspirators and Americans that are actually working for these foreign interests get their cut. And so it just goes from one bank to another bank to another bank to another bank. And it follows a specific route. And these are the same banks that are involved in each one of these income gathering or asset gathering schemes. So, we know that Bank of New York Mellon is the first stopping off point. We know that the Vatican Bank is the second stopping off point. We know that the Bank of Canada is the third stopping off point. And from there it goes to Bank of America. So all these bank of institutions are part of that entire human trafficking and collateralization, securitization of living flesh scheme. And they're operating according to a system that was set up by King Henry VIII to harvest the value of souls and to trade upon them.
So, Anna, I'd like to double back here for a second. And you made the statement about writing and claiming, the assemblies claiming back out of the state trust for all of their people. But in a way, we have to prove that we are ready and able to, kind of assume that business, correct? So we have to be standing or close to standing before we really do that, and not be distracted by individually, claiming that too early before we're ready to really go after that business.
Well, here's the problem for them. When they rolled your assets into their state trust, they didn't make a distinction.
Right.
They just took everybody's stuff and threw it in the state trust.
Mm-hmm.
So now how do they determine what your interest in the state trust is? They don't even know for sure how many people are living in your State of the Union. And how many of those people are Americans? And how long does the provenance of that American extend back into the past? What are they owed? What are they grandfathered in for? What percentage of profit from the state trust is theirs? All these questions just kind of pop up like, mushrooms in the springtime. And what it begs for is a truly comprehensive and systemic change. I think that most of us would be very satisfied if we simply had our public and private interests honored, such that, it was fully admitted and the control of public assets was vested in the people of the state that actually own the asset, instead of the people of the state being considered a donor to a public trust. That, for starters, that would go a long way toward settling out all the jurisdictional horse hooey that has gone on. So, there are certain things that we can do that are a systemic answer for everybody that needs to be invoked in order to put an end to these evils. But by joining together and creating our own state assembly as a focal point for our government to organize and be sentient and able to defend itself and to enforce its contracts, that's a fundamental part of what we need to be doing in order to gain those systemic answers. I have documents from a former Alaska governor proving and admitting that, yes, all of Alaska belongs to the people who live here. It's literally owned by the people who live here. It does not belong to the government. It does not belong to any government corporation. But because it was all placed in a state trust, that state trust and unelected, unknown British sympathizing trustees have been having the benefit and the ability to use all of those assets as collateral and to invest those assets without the permission and without the participation of the actual owners, who have been converted unlawfully into presumed donors.
I got thrown offline and then thrown back online. And when I came back online, all the questions changed, Anna.
Oh,
we're way over time. And so I just wanted to throw up two questions real quick. I was looking for the other one, the green card one. Lisa, can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Do you want to ask that one? And then I was going to put these couple of small questions up.
Sure, let me find it.
Because my entire system got reset.
Okay, hold on. It was about a question on if someone with a green card changed their status, is it necessary for them to continue to keep their green card and keep it active?
And this is kind of another question behind that, Anna. Like, there's a lot of concern currently for anybody who watches the news. Like, I don't. So, but the people that watch the regular NBC or whatever news, they think that if they think they're going to get thrown out of this country if they were here on green cards, or if they have been awarded citizenship post the 70s even. I can't tell you the weird buzz that's going on because of this presidential election, this fake whatever nonsense theater.
Well, the military is taking over. And as I shared with everybody on the webinar last night, my husband recently had to get a state ID in order to communicate with them. Okay, so what you do is you get a state ID for purposes of identification only. Okay, and so you do this, and then you get your updated assembly ID that places you squarely in both camps in terms of who you are. Okay. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so he had to go through that process recently, and we found out that the most recent photograph that the military government has of him is in 1962. It's his Air Force photo. And you're going to be seeing a lot of strange things because they haven't had to directly administer most of this crap themselves since then. They don't have any of your driver's license photos on file anymore. Because that was a different government, a different corporation that was doing all that work. That was a municipal corporation that was doing all that work for them. And now the municipal corporation has been removed, the second government comes forward. Remember I was telling you how there was a Department of Labor and then there was the DOL, and that the DOL did all the front work. They were in the front room while the Department of Labor was in the back room. And there was basically two governments that were running in tandem, and that you know, all of these things are mirrored so that you have the Department of Defense written out, upper lowercase Department of Defense, and then you have what? The DOD. Well, everyone thought that this was just an abbreviation standing for the Department of Defense, but actually no, they're two completely separate governments being run as two completely separate corporations. And so what's happening now is that the DOL and all the alphabet soups are being shoved out. The subcontractors of the subcontractors are being shoved out, and the military, British territorial government, is stepping back into that slot that they've always really controlled. And their corporations are coming forward out of the back room, out of the holding pattern room, to take over the functions of that the municipal corporations were doing. And this is going to cause a lot of confusion and disruption because even though it was set up that way to provide a smooth flip-flop between the two, there is not the communication. This is one of the things that's been most concerning and consternating about the entire situation, is that the municipal corporation doesn't talk to the territorial corporation and vice versa. And so all of your driver's license photographs that identify your picture with your name are gone. And there's going to be hell to pay in terms of identifying yourself properly as you, and connecting yourself, your physical body, with that baby that was born back in 2006. So everybody needs to be taking action to update their IDs and to get their state assembly credentials, their state credentials updated, verified, and in place. Everybody needs to be getting their photographic evidence of themselves and their name association on record. Now, my husband and I did that by actually taking photos of ourselves and doing an early version of the witness statement, and getting actual friends and relatives who know who we are and can verify who we are and what our name is to sign up. And then we actually recorded all of that stuff. Okay, so we have viable public records that connect our faces with our names.
Right. We all, in the assemblies, we should all have that.
Right. We should all have that through our state credential system, or through the global family credential system.
Is our current LRO up to date now with the credential cards?
I believe so. I believe they've made all of the adjustments that were necessary. I sent a last query about that yesterday, but I believe they are. Okay. The whole situation has gotten extremely unstable, and the British territorial corporations and their government are coming back into view. And as they do, you'll notice that the 3-letter agencies and the 4-letter agencies are disappearing from view. You won't hear about DOL. You'll hear about Department of Defense. You won't hear about DMV. You'll hear about Department of Motor Vehicles. The records that the municipal corporations had will be not available to the territorial government because it's a separate government. The entire thing is going to be very disruptive in that you won't be able to rely upon these public records that you thought were public that were going to be there forever, because they probably won't be. When you go to look for them, you'll find that all your photographic IDs and everything are gone. And unless you happen to have yours and have it in hand, it won't stand you any good stead at all. You won't be able to prove anything based on that.
So did
So
the municipal go under? Meaning like
the
we literally.
municipal is being forced aside, and part of that was a bankruptcy that occurred in 2015. Okay, so it was a Chapter 7. It was not negotiable. It was an end of that corporation. There was no reorganization from the Chapter 7 involuntary bankruptcy that was imposed on the municipal service provider in 2015.
How does
However,
that affect our post offices then?
we haven't had a post office system in a long time. We've had a postal service, which is a whole different bailiwick. Now we're going back to a federal post office system, because that's what the British territorial government can provide, is a federal post office. Okay, so you're going from a U.S. Postal Service, the USPS, to the United States Post Office, which is a different beastie.
Wow. So we just filed for our passports, and half of my family has them back, and actually all of us except my husband has to get his back. So I wonder what that means.
It's really hard to say at this point.
Yeah.
The municipal government was issuing passports as recently as last month.
Right.
But then they were running the Department of Motor Vehicles functions for the Department of Motor Vehicles last month too, and they're not this month. So, it's hard to say what it's going to mean in terms of passports, and most likely they will continue passports and hold them valid regardless of which service provider issued the passport, simply in order to keep things on an even keel and not to create a gigantic mess, that they have to clean up. So I don't think it's going to it's not going to make a real difference to you, the end line user, whether it was the DOD or the DOL or the patent office, or it's not going to make any big difference to you as the end line person being served, so long as you have a passport, or you have a driver's license, or you have a state ID, something that connects your name and your face, so that they can verify who you are, and that you really are the person of record, what they call the person of record. And so this is a concern. If you really stop a moment and think about it, how do you prove who you are? How do you connect your face and your name?
Well, we've done that, right? We've done that with our witness statements.
Yeah, we've done that.
But think of the millions of Americans who haven't.
Right.
And think of the millions of illegal aliens. This is where this question started. Are legal and illegal aliens, people who are here as either potential migrants or potential new citizens, or are here basically working on a temporary basis. What happens to them? And specifically, they're worried that all these migrants who have come here during the Biden administration will be rounded up and transported back to their country of origin. And, this is a reasonable expectation, because it was illegal to begin with and unlawful. So what they're looking at is the possibility of a situation like we had after the First World War. And this is kind of dirty, in my opinion, on the part of the government corporation at that time too. But during the First World War, they totally relaxed the immigration policies, and they left the southern border open, and thousands upon thousands of Mexicans crossed the border and took up jobs as housekeepers and gardeners and cooks and workers in factories in California and dock workers and everything else. I mean, a large percentage of the domestic labor force was taken over by illegally Mexicans who were coming across the border and working in the United States and then going home on the weekends, for example. And this was allowed. It was very outrageously and determinedly encouraged during the First World War because it was of an advantage to the corporation that was fronting participation in Europe, right? Well, and as soon as the First World War ended and all of those troops were coming back to this country, then all of a sudden the jobs that the Mexicans had occupied and served and done all these years were suddenly needed by the returning troops. And so the corporation authorized what was infamously called Operation Wetback under the auspices of the office of General John Pershing, who, of course, was one of the major generals in World War I. And so what Pershing did was adopt a zero tolerance policy toward Mexicans working in this country because, of course, his troops were going to need those jobs, right? And so they rounded up every illegally present Mexican that they could find, and a good many people who had legally and lawfully immigrated to this country too, and just shoved them back into Mexico. And I suspect that what you're seeing are concerns that another such roundup by the military is about to take place, and it may or may not be very nice about the mandate to return all of these foreign nationals to their country of origin. Now, they will do this. Number one, they will do it because they're mandated by their constitutional contract to do it, to close our border and to maintain it safely. So yes, they will close the border, and it won't make any difference what kind of policies Joe Biden's corporation offers for that. They're going to maintain their contract, and to hell with everybody else's contract or whatever they may think. So you can pretty much assure yourself that there will be number one, a closure of our southern border, and number two, a roundup of anyone who's here without proper documentation and all the rest of it. Now, where does that put us? Where does that put people with green cards? Well, people who are legally here and have green cards that are up to date and that have documentation showing how they got into this country are probably fine. As long as it checks out and that somebody of that name has been issued a green card with this number on it and, matching this description, they're probably going to be just fine. There's no reason to throw them out. But it's all these people that have come across the border, checked in at one checkpoint and been given a appointment date in 2035 to come back. Those people are going to be in trouble. They're going to be rounded up and exported back to wherever they came from. Now, there are a bunch of people here who have been here more or less illegally, people that entered with a green card that then let the green card lapse, people that, there are a lot of people who are here, who have been here for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And they've just been under the radar. They've been living here, they've been paying their bills, they've been working, have their families. For all intents and purposes, they're Americans. They're totally Americanized. But they don't have the provenance to show how they got here. And they're worried. Okay, so what we can do as a government is that we have a provision that if you've been here for 7 years and can prove through things like electric bills and other aspects, if you can prove that you've been here for 7 years and you haven't taken public assistance and you haven't committed a felony, then you can adopt the state of the union where you're living, and you can become an American state national, and you can join our assembly, and you can have a state credential card, and that will work for you. So if you've been here 20, 30 years and you haven't committed any felonies and you've been a worthwhile part of the community and not causing any problems or taking public assistance, then you are a valuable member of the community, and we recognize you and we welcome you, and you have the right to adopt your home in this country. That's our government, not their government, our government. Okay, so for a lot of people who have invested long periods of time in their life and who didn't go through the conventional system, this is a godsend. But for people that have a green card, keep your green card, because that is going to prove to the U.S. officials that you entered legally. And then also, as an ASN, you can join the state assembly and get your American state credentials. Do that also. This is that population that David Straight has been trying to help. Only he's been going at it from the standpoint of federal government workers. Well, in a way, federal government workers are just like people who've emigrated from another country, if you think about it, because they're in a completely different jurisdiction working for a different government, right? And so it isn't really that different. It's essentially the same problem. You have to be identifiable to the U.S. government, right? But you also have to have your ducks in order as an American. And so you want both IDs. You want to be clear in both systems if you possibly can. And if you can't, if you're one of those people that's been here for 20 years and living under the radar, by all means, go join your state assembly and, bring forward make your intention to adopt that state of the union as your permanent home and domicile, and, join and get your state credential card so that you are not caught up in any kind of unpleasant sweep of people who aren't supposed to be here.
Thank you for that, Anna. I was flashing up all the questions because you were answering them as you were speaking just now. So, friends, I was throwing your questions up here as she was talking about all of the different topics, because you kind of hit several people's questions as you did that.
We know what has historically happened, and it was not nice.
Right.
And I will also go so far as to say it was not fair. Basically they just used these people. They came here, they formed relationships, they had families, they had jobs, and just because the military wanted those jobs, they did this terrible house-to-house kind of search type thing, and grabbed these people by the ear and showed them the door. And it was not any kind of pleasant or It was like the Nazis going door to door looking for Jews. They went door to door and they hauled these people out, and if they couldn't immediately show their papers, then the Nazis took them to the border and kicked them in the rump, and that was that. But anyway, we would hope that the times have changed at least somewhat, and that that this will be done with more decorum. And we also hope that the people who have been lured here by the Democratic politicians and by people like George Soros realize that they are being used and that they are not gaining any protection or advantage by coming here that will not be available in their home country soon. A lot of people were paid to come here. Their transportation was paid, and they were given generous stipends with promises of access to more programs and more aid and everything else. They were sold a story of the Big Rock Candy Mountain. You now have the right to immigrate to America, and you can just come here, and it's the golden doors will open, and you'll be an American, and you'll have all these rights, and you'll have all this money, and you'll have all this opportunity. And so they all came, right? But what was actually happening is that the evil corporations that have been running everything were making money off of them. And they were making a lot of money off of them because the Americans are owed a tremendous amount of money individually. So the moment that you qualify as an American and can be counted as an American, your net value as an asset is astronomically improved. At the present time, say that you're born in Honduras. Your lifetime value to the corporations might be $100,000. Okay, so what happens? They cross the border and get counted as Americans, and now they're worth billions of dollars as assets. The U.S. corporation, or the USA corporation in this case, gains the benefit of the entire difference between $100,000 in Honduras and $100 billion in America. You see, they get that kind of allocation of extra asset on the books for every one of those people that crosses the border. And so, it doesn't take somebody like George Soros more than a nanosecond to figure out, well, gee, it's $100,000 in Honduras and it's $100 billion in America. So I'll cut a deal with the government of Honduras and pay their $100,000 plus another $100,000, double the value of their citizen who's departing, right? And the government of Honduras is really happy to let them go. I mean, they just doubled their take, right? They have less responsibility and more money. They don't care. And as for the poor shucker who's getting, human trafficked in this manner and for these purposes, they don't know. They're sitting in their house and they're watching TV and they're, just living their lives. And somebody says, hey, Jaime, over here, you can go to America and they'll pay your transportation and they'll give you $5,000 a month and they'll pay this much to have your kid come with you, and they'll give you new clothes, and they'll give you this and this and this and this and this. It's the best deal ever. Come on, let's move to America. So they hit the road. And they're just being paid chicken shit. They're being given the equivalent of plastic corn. Come on, folks. And so they cross over the border, and they don't realize that they're being used as pawns in this evil scheme of, collecting on collateral from our public trusts, which have grown to be immense. Okay? So anyway, they're being used. They're just being transported around and used in this manner. And then the further assumption on the part of those doing this is that these people are going to be so grateful to be given this free boat ride to America that they're going to vote Democrat for the next 100 years, and their kids after them, and their kids after them. And it's all just a very cynical misuse and abuse of people as chattel and as markers for a public trust interest. That's what it is. It's a shell game, and the people are just being used as pawns. If they realized the heartlessness and the money that the people that they think are their benefactors, if they had any idea what the people who are acting as their supposed benefactors were gaining off of them, they'd be amazed. And they'd also be appalled that they are themselves getting virtually nothing. What are they getting out of, the 100 billion that goes ka-ching into the coffers of the perpetrators of this? They're getting maybe 60,000. And that's the kind of crap that's going on here. It has nothing to do with, national borders or free enterprise or freedom or, people being able to immigrate or anything like that. It has to do just with Democratic Party politics and cheating the system to gain money. And people like George Soros ought to be rounded up and put in jail immediately. But anyway, the people that are the victims of this and the ones that are really put in danger are the immigrants themselves. And I will also mention that many of the countries that these immigrants are coming from have been overpopulated and have been poor. And so a lot of these countries in South America are glad to get rid of them because that represents an additional strain on their meager resources, and because they are getting paid double by the perpetrators of the scam. And what happens when these people show up back on their doorstep? They have a reasonable cause to object to these people returning home because they have left their home and evinced a loyalty to a foreign country.
Essentially, they were recruited, right?
They were recruited, right. Well, here's the deal, though. As this all gets straightened out, conditions in the third world are going to radically change. And the quote-unquote value of the people is going to radically change. And so all of a sudden, you won't have to go to America to have electric lights. You won't have to go to America to have, decent roads and schools and sanitation and jobs. You'll have it right in your own country. And so everybody will be encouraged to go back home. All these people that have come from the Mideast, how happy do you think they are in Montreal? Stockholm? No. Especially when there's water in the desert. All of a sudden, all these modern miracles are unleashed. And you can go home and be with your family, and you can live in your traditional culture, and you can have your religion without any friction.
Language.
Your own language. Who's going to pay?
You know what is so interesting? The problem is that folks just can't. They've been trained so much, Anna, to play this blame game. they've all been trained to become blamers and kind of like be lost in these little bitty things. I'll give you an example. We were on holiday last week, right? So we're making hot dogs. And I don't know about you, but like whoever leaves the ketchup with all the ketchup squirt like all over the mouth and they put the lid on it and it's just totally disgusting. I just find that dirty and, I have a problem with it. So I said, who did this to the ketchup bottle? Could you stop? And then immediately there's this, I didn't do it. She did it. He did it. She did. I said, listen, I don't care who did it. I'm not interested in blaming. Can we just not do it? It's gross. Like, it's just gross. Can you just wipe the lid off or rinse it or something? And then let's just move on. And I kind of feel like that's a situation with everything that we're trying to do. We're just saying, hey, could you please stop leaving a dirty lid? Like, just wipe the mouth of the bottle. What's the problem? And then let's just get it done, because none of us want this dirty stuff in the kitchen.
None of us want it, and none of us want to hurt other people over it. No. We certainly don't want to hurt the migrants who came here in good faith, having been sung a song and dance. And we don't want to hurt their families in this country, if they have family in this country that have, been loyal Americans all their lives. Instead there has to be, as I say, a systemic answer, and it has to be a good answer.
The grace and the love. Anna, you always ask, like, why? Why would you hurt somebody? Why would you do that? Why would you make them feel bad? Like this person saying, can I use my credential card and status correction paperwork to get my passport?
We are just now correcting the credential cards to include 2 pieces of information. Not all of the credential cards had a physical address, and they all have to have a physical address. So some of them were harmed by that. But generally speaking, the credential cards did not have a place for your signature, and they did not have the international standard nowadays is that they have to have a signature line, and they have to have an expiration date. Mm-hmm. Now, when you sign that credential card, you want to sign it with a small C inside a circle to copyright that signature. Mm-hmm. Okay. But that's a private copyright notice when you write it out in hand. So that's the only big change, is that there's a signature. You do need to put a private copyright, a small C in a circle behind or attached to your signature. Okay. Otherwise, it just puts a 10-year limit on the use of the credential card by establishing a expiration date 10 years in the future from when it's issued.
Right. Yeah.
If they're correct, they will be accepted as a means of establishing a passport.
Yeah. The passport office has a little form that they got to fill out, Anna, and on it, they also have to have the issue date. So if you only put the expiration date, I guess it needs to signify that it's a 10-year or something, so that they know to go back 10 years to know that was the issue date. I don't know what language you use for that. That's correct, but
yeah. Well,
so
the same thing with a lot of the credential cards initially had a machine-generated copyright with a C and a circle around it. The actual way that you put a private copyright notice in that is to say private copyright notice and then the year, and you just write it out in words, private copyright notice, and then 2020. Okay, that's how you handle that. You don't use the machine to do the copyright symbol, because that puts it in the jurisdiction of the C and in commerce. Okay, so we've learned all these things, and we're benefiting from them. I have to go through the last iteration of the LRO version of the credential card just to make sure there's no more details like that. The issue date could be just a tiny little byline up at the top corner or something. But these are different countries have different strokes. Some make you apply for a passport every 5 years.
Mm.
Some make you apply every 10 years. But the reason they have an expiration date is they don't want you to change so much in appearance that you're not recognizable.
Right. Right.
So that's why they do that.
Well, we have talked about so much, Anna, and you have really, I appreciate so much that you allowed us to go over, and I know that everyone out here is really appreciating it. Is it possible to get a quick update on the banking situation?
Well, the banking situation worldwide is crumbling. The economics behind it, it's all crumbling. And the reason it's crumbling is that it was set up on illegal and improper and false premises. It was built on sand. And it was not built with any kind of moral premise that would stand the test of time. And unfortunately, when people do this, they are setting up a naturally occurring destruction of what they've built. And so what you're seeing is a rigged stock market, a rigged commodity market, a vast interlocking impersonation scheme. You are seeing entire governments operating in a criminal and deceptive manner and doing it for long periods of time. And that has consequences because everybody who's been tainted by the British fraud has been adversely affected. And the military in this country is responsible, more or less, for advocating and maintaining the Federal Reserve System. Now, the Federal Reserve System has always been crooked. It's never been honest. For one thing, it's given the impression by its name that it was in some way connected to our government or was being run by our government, when in effect there was a department of government established to deal with the Federal Reserve. You see, it's just exactly opposite of what people assume. And the Federal Reserve is a private consortium of banks. It's about as federal as Federal Express, as people have often noted. So what we have is a department that deals with the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve operates as a private consortium or cartel of private banks. And we have the military enforcing the quote-unquote Federal Reserve System in the mistaken idea that this was necessary and that this was an emergency and blah, blah, blah. Well, as we've adequately demonstrated, the Federal Reserve note isn't even a negotiable instrument. It's monopoly money. It's military scrip that has been issued by private banks. Okay, there's no other way to put it than that. And people have been, for generations, exchanging actual goods and services in exchange for these IOUs that have no specified date of return and no specified means of return. So if you look at a Federal Reserve note, you will see that it's a promise to pay The issuer is a corporation called the United States of America Corporation. It is signed by two officials representing that corporation, but there is no date when that note is due, when they have to pay up, and there's no discussion of what it is that they're going to use to pay it back. So it's a non-negotiable instrument. It's monopoly money. And they've been using this to extract vast quantities of actual goods and services, not only in this country, but around the world. What started out as a domestic replacement for our silver money back in the 70s has now grown into a non-domestic currency because they have spread it all over the world. Beginning with Obama, our recognizable Federal Reserve notes are now being used in China and Saudi Arabia and all sorts of other places. But it was never meant to do any of that. It's supposed to be a domestic currency replacement for the silver dollar, used as a legal tender in lieu of the silver dollar and in exchange for the silver dollar. And the entire purpose of the Federal Reserve notes was to capture gold and silver at relatively no expense in inequitable trade in exchange for their promise to pay in the future. But they never made it clear that the promiser was a corporation that could go bankrupt. They misrepresented themselves as our government and gave people the impression that it was the government making the demand, when in fact it was just a corporation named after our government. And that corporation, of course, repeatedly went bankrupt, taking the gold and silver with it. It was a fraud scheme. They impersonated our government while operating as a for-profit private corporation. Then they bankrupted that for-profit private corporation, claimed that we were the public that was responsible for the costs of their bankruptcy, and took all our gold and took all our silver in inequitable exchange. They stole it under false pretenses. That's a crime. It's fraud on a grand scale. And because they publish remedies that they did not provide, they are doubly damned, because in order to legalize any of this, they have to actually provide the remedy. So you see, these corporations and those principals responsible for these corporations' existence really are in a bind, and they have to pay up. And what you'll find is that gold and silver doesn't disappear.
Not until they rob you like they did one other time.
Well, they rob you, but it's still in somebody's possession somewhere. It doesn't just leave the planet, does it?
No. People need to hold on to their property. They need to hold on to these things and realize, you shouldn't probably. I think it's interesting that they always want you to store it in their banks, in their places, in their safes, in their vaults. And
well, yes, and we see how that's worked out. They place false claims on abandonment on all of these assets left in their care and possession. And so all of this is now being brought forward, and the actual nuts and bolts of it are being pressed so that, the legacy trusts and the presumed donors have to be identified and have to be brought forward so that the corporate sponsors of these travesties do not get to operate as what are called executors de son tort. These are people that actually have no interest and no authority, who step into a middleman position and begin administering your affairs for their benefit.
So if we're alive, we better speak up.
Yes, and join together, get into your assembly, build up your assembly, and begin using your assembly and your government to defend you. Your government is supposed to be defending you and your property. And if it isn't doing so, then it's not your government.
Right. It's the robbers.
By definition, the only purpose of government is to protect the people and their assets. If your government is not doing that, it's not your government.
No.
It's something else calling itself your government. Okay. And that's basically what we've got going on here, is that these corporations have been using our name and impersonating us. It's called impersonation for a reason. The word person is a synonym for corporation. And when they impersonate you, they are basically claiming that a corporation named after you is you.
Right. These people that are asking all these questions, there's so many of them. All of these crimes that are happening are because you're not familiar with language. And this is something that all of us have to learn. It's the study that we're trying to do. We all need to be studying. Just learning the language part alone is a lifetime education that we were deprived of. It's something that's very frustrating, and I'm upset about it. I think a lot of people are. But then, we could be upset, or we could just start learning. We could just get to learning. It's how many times, Anna, do we find the big mess? How many times do I got to clean the garage out? I keep cleaning it out. We got to start all over, and we got to just do it again. Well,
yes, Niti, my mother observed me when I was young. I was complaining about being a girl. I said, the boys have got it good, And women, I observed early on that the women were constantly at work, from early in the morning to late at night. No matter what it was, my mother was running like a hamster in a wheel. And I said to her, I don't want to be a girl. The boys go, they work 8 hours a day, they come home, they flop in front of the TV.
They got their own chairs. They got their own chairs, Anna. Where's our chair?
Right. And here it is. It's midnight. You're still burning the midnight oil, ironing sheets. What in the hell? I don't want to be a girl. And she said, the difference between men's work and women's work is that women do all the work that has to be done continually. Men do all the work that only has to be done sporadically. There are some things that you do over and over and over and over, like washing the dishes, like washing the sheets, like, ironing shirts, like all of that stuff is just a continual hamster wheel of work that has to be done.
You mean like getting the guys out of jail? Like getting the guys out of trouble? That's what we do, right? They go out and they get into trouble, and then we go and we get them out of trouble.
Well, basically, we make life pleasant and clean and healthy and
nurturing.
Yes, we make life livable for everybody else through our labor, which people then take for granted, you see. Mom was always there to go do the shopping and bring it home and put it in the refrigerator and organize it in the cupboards. Mom was always there to wash the dishes. Mom was always there to wash the laundry and get it folded and put back where it would be ready to put on the bed again. And all of these things that Mom does are these constant things that have to be done to maintain and improve on the quality of life. Mom is the one who stocks the medicine cabinet and has the Band-Aid ready for when dad cuts his finger. Mom is the one who does all of this. And then in the modern world, in addition to doing all of that, mom is also supposed to go outside the home and earn an extra income. Now, she doesn't get paid as much as dad for doing the same work because, well, she's mom. Okay. And so, but she goes out and she earns this extra income, whether she does that by working for a company or by working at a home business or, whatever. But she goes out and she earns an extra income on top of doing all of this very repetitious work that has to be done. Now, our ancestors wisely shared out mom's work with the kids. And then the boys, as they got older, started sharing in dad's work so that they became familiar with what dads do. Okay, and that's the way things were sort of portioned out. Little boys up until about the age of 10 helped their mothers and learned to do dishes and learned to cook and learned to, do all those things, take care of the chickens and blah, 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 the things that were women's work up until about the age of 10. And then when they started getting a little bit older and started to have some capabilities, then they were tracked into helping dad and doing the more masculine work. Okay, so that's how things were separated out. Nowadays, the tendency is for the kids to lay and be babied until they're in high school before they actually have to do any work around the house. And those that have to do
They're not even allowed to eat with silverware, Anna. The whole problem is that they don't know how to use a knife and a fork. They don't know how to actually just eat properly. Never mind cook properly or do anything, because they're not allowed. And they're not even allowed to get a job unless they're 17 or 18, because they've trained all these people into believing that child labor is a problem. They don't have any concept of what they're actually supposed to be. I mean, we're talking about the pedophiliacs who have trained the rest of the world into believing that giving children any type of purpose is abuse. That's not abuse. Children love to have responsibility.
It's a service to them. They're not prepared for life.
Sure.
Right. Yeah, you're disrespecting them by not seeing them in their full power at all times. This is the other part of the thing. Folks can't even see each other like other adults, Anna. They can't even see other adults in their full power. I feel like, they've confused charity. They believe, I think the greatest gift we could give anyone is to let them know that I believe they can handle the truth, that they can handle the reality of a situation.
And knowing how to do your own laundry is empowering. I don't care who you are or where you are. Knowing how to maintain your own car is empowering.
Or feed yourself.
You're not dependent on someone else, right?
Correct.
You know certain things. You have certain skills. Now, right. As a girl growing up in a farming community in the Midwest, I learned a lot of things. I learned how to make pickles and sauerkraut. I learned how to salt down and smoke meat. I learned how to can meat safely. I learned how to make jams and jellies and go out and forage around and find mushrooms in the forest. I learned a lot of things of real value that I still maintain and still have in my head and still have in my hands that I can teach somebody else and empower them.
Exactly.
Okay. And that's what older people are supposed to be doing for younger people. They're supposed to be empowering them. They're supposed to be teaching them life skills. They're supposed to be teaching them helpful, useful, powerful affirmations of who they are so that they can go forward in life and feel secure and competent and able to do everything that they need to do.
Yeah. grow them and develop them. We have to grow them and develop them. And that requires the patience. That's what the women do too. We have the patience to do the teaching that the men don't want to do.
Well, to get back to my point, I didn't want to be a woman. I wanted to be one of those dogs that get to come home and lay down in front of the fire and enjoy, all. And so my mother pointed out that there are some forms of work which are entirely repetitious, that never end. And that's been apportioned to women. And that there are other forms of work where you just do it once and you have the satisfaction of it. And that's very satisfying indeed. And that portion of the work got apportioned to men. And she said, you can have both if you want.
I'm laughing, Anna, because this is the third time this week this conversation has come up. It seems to be the theme of my week. And my answer to it was, well, I think I need a second wife. I need a wife.
Yeah. Or
somebody to go and help do my dishes and get it done, and my laundry done, and my grass cut, and my flower beds weeded, because
do you know how difficult it is to find a housekeeper?
I know. Well, I'm hoping that when GFG finally is able to be used in the way that will help support some of those things out there, that might be in my future as a housekeeper, so that I can pay somebody well to come in and do that kind of support while I'm off doing my thing, right? So,
well, it used to be fairly common that women would help each other in that way, and they would be paid a wage to come in for a few hours here and a few hours there.
Right.
But they've made the labor laws so completely absurd, and they've made the demands of reporting on everything so absurd that it's virtually impossible for people to work on that kind of friendly, neighborly basis that they used to do.
Well, that was what the young people did. That's what I'm talking about, Anna. None of the kids are allowed to just do, like, what adult of 18 or over, what kind of guy 18 or over is trying to bag groceries? Nobody. That's something that the 10 or 11 or 8-year-old would want to do, and they should allow them to do that. I mean, my first job was bagging groceries. I was 13. I was really proud to have a job at the grocery store and get a discount that my mom could take advantage of. And I was a bagger of the groceries. I could just walk up there, do my job for however few many hours, and then come back home. And we would also be the ones restocking the shelves because we were kids. We were excited to do it, and we were competent enough to do it. And we had a purpose, and we made a little bit of money, and,
In the world I came from, it was entirely common for grown women who wanted to make a little extra money on the side to take in laundry.
Yes.
Or to, to volunteer to do the family baking for the week.
Yeah, because people love to bake, and not me, but somebody does.
Well, right. I remember as a child that same thing. We're only 2 years different, Anna, and in age. And, the thing back then was when someone's children went to school and you had time on your hands, then you took on maybe helping clean someone's house or helping bake or doing laundry or doing ironing or, going and weeding a garden somewhere, because you could make the little bit, my mother called it pin money. You could make the little bit of extra money, right, while your child was at school and still be home when they came home and be able to be engaged with them. And that's the society I would really love to get us back to.
Yes.
To where we have that kind of society going on where we can focus on our generations, our homes. That's my hope and desire. So,
Well, the
Or
other
helping to sew. We had a lady on our street, she loved to sew.
Yeah.
And I remember that I wanted to learn how to sew. My mom said, "Why don't you go ask Mrs. Lenny if she'll let you, work with her for a few hours?" And I did, and I got to learn a lot, and we were just mending people's things from around the neighborhood.
Right, but we used to do these things, and we used to know our neighbors, and
Yes.
we used to have vibrant communities where people were sharing skills. Uh, Elders were teaching not just their own children, but other people's children too. I
Yeah.
mean, I learned to play the drums from my best friend's father. I mean,
Right.
oddball things. It might not be I don't have a set of drums, but I can still do rat-a-tat-tat,
Right.
Yeah.
oddball skills that people naturally were teaching their children and their children's friends, and everybody was a community, and we knew each other, and we shared this incredible roster of different skills that different people had.
Yep.
And it was done on numerous levels. It was done on a community basis. It was done on a one-to-one basis. It was done as just a natural part of being human, being part of a community. It was not anything that anybody thought about. I mean, you took the kids out berry picking, and they learned to pick berries. You took the kids out to the garden, and everybody had a row to hoe. So you learned how to hoe and get rid of weeds. You learned to do these things in a very natural, on hands way. And any community elder who had skills just shared those skills with the younger people as a matter of course. A guy who was working on his car instantly had 5-10-year-old boys clustered around watching everything he was doing and asking questions about it. So that was our life. That was the way it was. And it was a good way. And all this information and all these skills got passed on to the next generation and empowered that next generation to be able to do things for themselves. Okay.
Like the quilting bees. We used to have the quilting bee club too. We had all these things in our neighborhood, and it was fun.
And learning those skills is empowering. Every single thing that you learn is power to you. Right. And instead of our children being brought up with the idea that school is empowering them,
right,
or that a job or a chore or a task of some sort is empowering them, they are given the idea that, oh, this is slave work. This is stuff that you don't need to learn. This is stuff that is old-fashioned.
It is old-fashioned because, but that's how you learn. That's how you know things. I mean, anyway.
Well, I'm just observing to you all that, when the proverbial poop hits the fan, there are going to be a lot of people starving to death because not only do they not have any food set aside, which would be a commonplace at any other time in American history, but because they don't know how to grow food, they don't know how to preserve food, and they don't know how to prepare food that has been preserved or canned at home. And, there's just, when the 1930s hit, America was still pretty able to respond and to deal with it because we still had all these practical homebody skills that we had learned from our elders. We still knew how to grow a victory garden in the Second World War. We still knew how to take care of our animals. We still knew how to butcher. We still knew how to preserve meat. We still knew how to make sauerkraut, okay? We still knew all these basic skills that everybody, whether you were living in town or out of town, everybody had this kind of communal skill set that allowed people in the 1930s to survive. if we are looking at a situation even worse than the 1930s, 2/3 of the population won't live because they won't have the skills and they won't have the wherewithal. They won't have the community to support them that they did in the 1930s.
Well, we're going to continue to grow the farms. And so I'm, Anna, looking forward to working with you on that front, because we're going to start bringing home farmers. And we are going to ensure the security of the food system for all our states as a side effect of that. So I'm actually on my way to Michigan this weekend. We're doing a big tribe. It's going to be on Mark Baker's Baker's Green Acres farm in Michigan, and it's a big tribe day on Saturday. And folks come there from all over the country. And they come to learn because Mark Baker teaches that anyone can farm. And so people are coming to learn and teach and share skills. And I'll be over there talking about you. And we'll be talking about this work. And we're going to be talking about how people can come home and how they can, really take control of their land and be radically self-reliant and take care of themselves.
Well, that is certainly to be applauded and encouraged in every corner that we possibly can. And, we are looking at a world that, while I'm doing everything that I possibly can to assure that there are other systems in place to replace the Federal Reserve System, we, on one hand, we're going like hamsters in a mill trying to get rid of the system that's bad and replace it with something good. But at the same time, we're over here on this side preparing for the worst, because, who knows how this scenario is going to work out? Will reason and sanity and truth prevail in time to prevent a catastrophic economic collapse? We don't know.
Right.
Can we suppress those evildoers in our midst who are trying to promote war as a means to profit themselves? Can we, get the message through all of the numerous blockades and channels and gatekeepers to the people who need to know in order to keep the military on track? There are so many variables, there are so many possibilities, and certainly I encourage everybody to get some food, some long-term food storage set aside for them and their families. I encourage everybody to think about, where they could have a small garden, or even how they can grow things in their windows. I have an entire series where you can use vegetables from the market to re-grow plants.
That's right.
And so there are ways in which you can make small efforts toward becoming more secure. Food secure, water secure, fuel secure are the big three. And then, of course, doing everything that you can to look ahead as to what your needs might be if suddenly, for 6 months or a year, all of the normal chains of supply chains are disrupted. What happens? Where are you in the midst of this? Where's your family in the midst of this? What kinds of organizations are there out there that are helping to prepare for the case of a bad eventuality? Certainly our militias, which, have accrued a bad name mainly by the vermin that are responsible for this situation, labeling people. But our militias are supposed to be one of our main sources of pre-planning for disasters, and for doing things like having a public food bank or food storage for the members of their assembly. Thinking about water sources. In our community, we actually purposefully dug wells on private land, but with easy access by the community, that are set up where a person can drive in and pump water and take it home. So that there's trouble.
Sorry.
No, this is the planning that we need to do.
I was going to say the Ohio Assembly is having an all-state meet and greet July the 21st, on Sunday, July the 21st. And part of that, we're going to be doing some militia education along with it, where we get together and we're going to learn a little first aid. They were looking at having some canning demonstrations, of which we're looking for someone who can teach us how to can meat, and also freeze dry meat and vegetables and things. And so we're getting ready to do some of those little demonstrations and little seminars on the Ohio Assembly in order to get people, really thinking in those directions towards not only, tuning up their skills, but being able to teach those skills to other people on our state. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. That's exactly what's needed. And it builds community. It builds a sense of empowerment, and it builds a skill base that can come in awfully handy. Just building a community oven, an outdoor oven, one of the old traditional beehive-shaped ovens, and learning how to stoke it up with firewood or coal makes a tremendous difference in the ability of a community to maintain its bread stores. Having crockery. How many communities still have the big old earthenware crocks that can make things like pickles and sauerkraut and pickled beets and pickled apples and all those things that our forefathers depended upon to get them through the winter? How many of us know where we can order things like a non-electric egg beater? How many of us have got sufficient containers that are not BPH plastic or some other nasty substance to be able to keep our flour and our cornmeal and our other grains over the winter? How many of us have a root cellar where we can keep potatoes, carrots, and other vegetables long term? I have all of this, but it has taken me years and thought to do it. And this is something everybody should be doing for themselves and for their community. Now, we understand that there are elders and there are young people who are not going to be able to do this on their own. They're going to need help. And so, certainly a role for our militia is to think about it in terms of, okay, how can we develop the skills and how can we provide for our community, for those that can't provide for themselves? How are we going to do this in case of an emergency? Whether that's an emergency caused by a natural thing like a flood or a drought, or it's an emergency caused by, some sort of social disruption of the food chains and the supply chains. These are considerations for our militias, and our militias mean the people. It's important to understand that the word militia means people, and people means militia. It's a Hebrew word, and it's entirely a synonym. So it's the people either way, no matter what you say. And this is something that we as a community of people, a I won't say society because that that implies something else, but as a community of people, this is something that we are certainly called to contemplate and take action on. We have, in Alaska, we have community water pumps that have been installed on private land, but with the intention that if the city water and sewer systems go bad, that people will have access to water, potable water. We have pre-planned portable latrine systems. We have pre-planned food storages. We have pre-planned mills. We have pre-planned coal resources that we can access so that we're not just reliant on going out and chopping down trees, which of course is another thing that people have forgotten how to do. We have draft horses. We have many different materials like citric acid and tannic acid and all these other things that are chemicals that we've stockpiled because they're used in some respect, like tanning leather, or they're used in some form of preservative or some process. We have stockpiled this stuff because we know that we might need it. And we realize here in Alaska that we're at the end of a very long food chain, and that 3 weeks after the big ships stop coming into port laden with goods from other places, including a lot of food, that we could all be in a world of hurt. So, maybe this attitude and this concern has been preserved here on the last frontier a lot longer than it has been in other places. But what I'm telling you is that even as we are working so very hard to prevent that kind of social and cultural and governmental collapse and financial and economic collapse that can come with it, even as we are doing everything in our power to prevent that, we are also making speed on preparing for the worst. What happens if the lights go out? What happens if the food isn't available to buy at any price? What happens if you are stuck in a situation where you didn't expect to be and you suddenly have to provide for yourself and your family? In 1911, a giant flood came through the Black River Valley, and it was a 500-year flood, and it took out everything in its path. The center of Black River Falls, Wisconsin, was devastated, and most of the major buildings, shops, factories, everything was swept away. My grandmother, just in advance of the flood, loaded up a buckboard with blankets and whatever food she could carry and her 5 small children, and raced up a hill over into a higher elevation and to a horse barn, which was kept on a farm property without a house. It was just a farm property with a horse barn. And for the next several months, she and her children lived alone through the winter in a horse barn. And they had a horse and a dog. 5 kids and a mom in a horse barn through a Wisconsin winter. Well, they got to the spring, and all they had left was a couple of tablespoons of fat and like a half cup of flour. and nobody had come from the town. Her husband hadn't been able to get through. The neighbors hadn't been able to get through. They had spent this entire time with nothing but a horse, a dog, and the 5 kids. They were starving. And it didn't look like they would make it. But she got up that morning, she looked out the door, and she saw what? Dandelions. The first dandelions were blossoming. So she went out and she got handfuls of dandelion flowers and used the last of her flour and her oil to make dandelion fritters. And that day, at about midday, my grandfather and a bunch of other men from the village showed up and rescued them. They had nothing left. Everything had been destroyed in the flood. Their business, their store, their home, everything had been destroyed in the flood. In that horse barn was a quart jar of cabbage seeds. Nobody knows how a quart jar full of cabbage seeds ever got into a horse barn. Why it was there, nothing. We know nothing about that. Nobody remembered putting it there, but it was in the tack room of the horse barn. And so they planted cabbages. And in the fall, they sold the cabbages to their neighbors or bartered with their neighbors. And that's how they survived. By the grace of God, by the help of their neighbors, by pooling their skills and resources, by trading whatever they had, which in our case happened to be cabbages, and they survived. And I want you all to know that we might come to that again in this great country. We might be out there, as they used to say, picking shit with the chickens. But we have to be ready for that psychologically, and we have to be ready for that to the extent that we can in terms of developing the skills, retaining the skills, and preparing ahead as much as possible. So for the last several years, yes, I have been telling people, well, we are working on this and we are hoping to get a systemic answer, and we are trying our best to maintain and make sure that nothing bad happens to anybody. But if it does, remember your old homely skills. Remember your life skills. Teach the life skills. Take the steps to secure your family and your community.
And I think that's an important point for being involved with your state assembly, because you're going to have other people that you are going to know that are going to be there hopefully to help you and you to help them, and to trade those skills, those resources and things back and forth. And, everybody says, oh, well, I don't have time. Well, one of these days you may have all the time in your hands and none of the connections to do it. And now is the time to plan for that, to get your things in place, get your people in place, and to work on those types of things that are going to benefit us if things fall apart.
Right. And all of these media personalities and their, high heels and their snubby personalities making fun of preppers are going to be the ones who are so desperately going to need the preppers if anything does go wrong, if we are unable to come to a reasonable and amiable settlement of these many issues, if we're unable to build a new economic and financial system, if we are um, actually put into this situation of artificial impoverishment. If all of these things are not handled at a governmental level, then they have to be handled at an individual and community level. And so we're trying to prepare everyone for that eventuality. You know, we might go through hard times in this country yet again.
Well, we are the government, this is the whole thing that people don't seem to comprehend. And it's the lie that everybody's been fed for a long time. All I see is the same questions over and over about the relief coming in. But I think Anna's trying to make a point today. If y'all aren't getting the gist of it or not, I don't know. But she's trying to make a point. There has to be, the mental strengthening that people require, Anna, unfortunately, will probably only happen after the suffering. Those of us who are pushing ourselves to the extreme in practicing all of these things with radical self-reliance. I mean, my family fasts on a regular basis, Anna. There's a lot of things you can do to prep besides just growing a victory garden. And part of it would be to make sure that you're in shape, make sure that you can fast, make sure that sure, it's fantastic to be able to put away all that you can. You should know how to cook and can. And I know how to can everything, including all the meats. And I know how to put away the meat and freeze dry it. And we know how to make pemmican. We know how to make things go a really long way. We also know how to process animals on our own land and how to use every drop of the blood, to our benefit. And most folks don't know how to use a knife. They don't know how to sharpen a knife, unfortunately. And
that's what I'm saying.
Right. They're asking about the banks. They're asking about the money. They're asking about all these other things. And yet, meanwhile, do you guys know how to cook dinner?
Yes, we have allowed ourselves to be disarmed in a sense. We have allowed our power to drain away along with our skill and knowledge base. And that, more than anything, is what our enemies depend upon. And there are enemies in this world that wish this country ill. Chief among them, Britain.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true. And as Niti said, a lot of people are asking about GFG and when we're going to have, but if we don't have manufacturing on our country, if we don't have power, if we don't have clean water, if we don't have all of those things, and the weather weaponry that they have been deploying, that's pretty obvious. You can watch it. Then, all the credit, all the asset in the world is not going to help you if there's nothing available to buy.
Right.
So
right.
we have to learn to really be able to provide for ourselves. Just think about those people right now who are in southern Texas. They're out without power. Some are in flooded areas, so they don't have good sewage treatment. They don't have fresh water. What do they do? What if that was months long, not just a week long or a few days long? What would you do? What would we do here in the northern states, like you said, in the winter? If they shut off your power, how are you going to stay warm? What are you going to do? What's your plans to be able to survive, those types of things? And that's, that preparedness for us is important. We have to know how to take care of ourselves.
And we have to be able to do that on a local level because every place is different, has different resources. Mm-hmm. And so this has to be done at a local level by the militias at a local level. And we have to do this now because I tell you, the world is teetering on the brink of chaos, the like of which we have never seen in hundreds of years. And sort of like the 500-year flood of the Black River. This is expected if it gets loose, if it isn't properly managed, if we don't manage to bring forward the new system, then there won't be food to buy.
I mean, money is not the solution for everything, friends. That's what I think the bigger point is today. And so, although, you know, it helps us, it's a good tool and it will help us with certain things. At the end of the day, what you know is going to be more important. Your skills, nobody can take your knowledge away.
Right. But in a world that's blasted back to the Stone Age, do computer skills matter?
Right.
When you are thinking in terms of what really matters, does gold matter or does bread matter? Especially if gold can't buy bread.
And what about energy? Do you even know how to go outside and, you know, create energy for your family? Because a lot of people don't know. I mean, they don't even know how to use a steak knife. Let's just be real. I have people who I'm teaching how to chop an onion or patty a burger. And I'm not saying this and saying it with any kind, I'm not saying this like pridefully. I'm saying it like, it's just sad. This is sad that I'm talking to mothers who have teenage children and they've never made them breakfast, with like never cracked eggs into a pan and made food for their kids, or don't know that you can patty a burger or whatever. What are you going to do? Because you're not going to be able to go through the drive-through.
HelloFresh isn't going to be there either.
You're talking about HelloFresh. You know what I learned is that most of these moms aren't doing any of it. And most of the kids, they actually have something on their phone and they do something and then the car shows up with their bag of food. That's not going to be what's happening, friends.
No. And I think that, you know, I had to teach my granddaughter how to make an apple pie. Why? Because her parents divorced and her mother didn't have time. Her mother was building a new life and didn't teach her daughter anything. So you're going to see a generational thing go on where the old folk are suddenly going to become very valuable as a source of these skills and knowledges.
Yeah.
Because there's more to it than you might guess.
That's right.
Yes.
You're exactly right, Anna.
Exactly. It's true. Right. It's true. We're talking to them every day. You know, when folks are saying, well, how do you know this, that, the other? Where's the article? Where's the, no, I know a lot of old ladies. I was in the kitchen with a lot of them and they taught me a lot of things and I can't provide you with a link to give it to you.
There's not a link. You have to do it yourself.
Right.
With your own hands in your own experience. Nobody can teach you to make bread. You have to get your hands in the dough and learn what the dough is communicating back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to know what things feel like. Like you need to know how to do things, not read about it or not watch a video. And it's the reason why we didn't send our kids to university, Anna. My kids are working with other people who know how to do things so that they can know how to do things. And you want to learn how to do things from different people. You're going to have to put up with some people that you don't like. This is skill number, you know what the first skill was that my son had to learn when he left home? Like that was the most valuable out of all the skills. When you go miles and miles and miles away from home by yourself for the first time, the most important skill he had to learn was to advocate for himself. He needed to learn how to talk to a stranger and advocate for himself and befriend this stranger. And then hopefully be able to learn something from that stranger, old man, that old man stranger.
Right.
Well, I've commented many times in a lot of places where people will say, why aren't the schools teaching this? They need to teach this. They need to teach that. The schools need to teach you how to read, how to do the mathematics, what history is, and they need
Writing.
to teach you the writing. They need to teach you those things. But the things that matter most in life are the
Be at
things that
home.
we teach at home.
Yeah.
We as mothers and fathers are our children's, our progenies' first educators. We're their primary educators. And we need to be the ones teaching them how to wash dishes, how to cook, how to cut up things, how to take and make bread.
Why to keep the ketchup bottle clean? Why does it even matter?
Exactly. All those things, we, the mothers and the fathers, we're the ones that's supposed to teach them that.
Yeah.
And we have lost that sense in our communities and within our people that our older people, they don't know nothing. Go to the internet.
Well, that person's so hard to listen to. Why do we got to listen to that old lady? She talks so slow. I mean, you're going to have to make this a little bit more interesting. Yeah. Can you do that in 2 minutes? Why is this taking forever?
Right. Dinosaurs. So, but one of these, the dinosaurs are the ones, I can step into the kitchen and I can make all kinds of things and never look at a recipe.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever used a recipe card.
So, I have, but the thing, sorry to those who are out there who love reading the food blogs, and I see a recipe or something that looks good I want to make, and I got to go through 4.5 pages of explanation and diatribe on the internet for it. Please just put a go to recipe button up there, because I don't need to know any. I know how to do that. I already know how to do that. Just give me the ingredients.
Yeah.
So, it's, I mean, the world is very different at this point, and it could swing back to where it will be so very different that that the skills that our grandmother, my mother, those things that they taught us are going to be valuable again, and more valuable than you can ever imagine,
Yeah.
It could swing back really hard, and we need to be prepared. Just something as simple as socks.
Yeah.
I have a darning egg. I know how to darn a sock, that darn sock. So, yeah, it's, in fact, I have my mother's darning egg. So yeah,
I had to use a water bottle because we didn't have one.
Well, I see Harold is calling you to.
Yes, the day is on me.
All right.
Hey, Harold.
Hey, Harold.
Well, I returned from missions.
Yes.
Good. Well, thank you, Anna, so much for your time. We've gone way over today.
Way over.
I think this is the longest podcast we've ever done, but delightful. So thank you for the conversation.
Thank you for the teaching.
Take care, girls.
All right.
We appreciate you. We'll see you next Tuesday.
We women who do all of the repetitious work.
Indeed.
Indeed.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Love you guys.
Take care.